Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. I figured we would go live. Let me see if I can find the link to this stream. There it is. So let me grab that. Okay. So I figured we go live. We are seeing Bitcoin break above 30K, but we're also seeing the dominance go with it. So we talked about this a lot over the last forever, right? The general idea of a Bitcoin only pump to get the dominance above the range highs. Now, what were the range highs? We are very close. And it's an important point to consider because if it breaks above, which I think it will, right? I think it will. If the dominance breaks above the range, then what it means, or at least what I think it means, is that upon the correction by Bitcoin USD, the altcoin market should absolutely get decimated, is the idea. But it needs to get above, it needs to get to 49%. Now, technically speaking, it's not actually 49%. If you look at this range here, we already took out this one. This one was at 48.45. We're above that, right? So that one is taken care of. We're above this one, which was at 47.72. So that one's taken care of as well. We have not taken care of this one, which is at 48.92%. So the point, as we've said, is that we need to break above this range so that Bitcoin can remind the altcoins who is king. And the way that works is essentially the Bitcoin rallies until, or theoretically, it gets the dominance above the prior range high so that when Bitcoin USD corrects, the altcoin market has nowhere to hide, okay? Now let me show you something interesting, a good way to visualize this. All right, so take a look at Bitcoin USD. Think about it like this. We talked about Bitcoin only rallies a long time, right? Like the idea that the Bitcoin only rally gets the dominance higher. And the idea is that no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD, the dominance should go higher. And so if you subscribe to that theory, then there's just no reason to have altcoins, right? At this stage of the cycle. It essentially means that the alt season that people are waiting for isn't going to occur, is what it means. Instead, what will likely happen is Bitcoin, whenever it corrects, the altcoin market just immediately corrects with it and does not go on a parabolic rally like a lot of people would hope. Now, let me show you some evidence for that idea. Bitcoin USD has not only broken out of this downtrend line, but it's also taken out the November high. You might say, the November high? Why are we talking about the November high? You know, who cares about that? Who cares about 21K? Why is that important? Well, I'm glad you asked. If you were to go take a look at total 3, which is the altcoin market, right? This is the altcoin market. Even though Bitcoin USD has been going on essentially a Bitcoin only rally, what happened to total 3? What happened to all the altcoins that people say are going to gain ground on Bitcoin? What happened to them? Well, collectively, now I'm not talking about whatever 10 million market cap coin that your friend printed last weekend. I'm talking about the majority, the collective altcoin market. Bitcoin USD broke above the November high. It also broke its downtrend line. Total 3 could not even be bothered at this point to get above its October-November high, right? November high. Bitcoin broke the November high, back in January. What's total 3 doing? right? So what's happened? Bitcoin is sucking in liquidity from the altcoin market. That's what's happening. I mean, we can spin up whatever narrative we want, but that's what I think is happening, right? I think Bitcoin is sucking in liquidity from the altcoin market. And all you have to do is go look basically at any day, go look at alt Bitcoin pairs, and you can see they just bleed, right? They bleed constantly, fairly consistently. Ethereum, Bitcoin, ADA Bitcoin, dot Bitcoin, link, and the list just goes on, right? So the altcoin market continues to bleed. Now you must ask yourself, right? What's the point of buying alts if they just bleed against Bitcoin, right? What's the point? You know? I don't know. You have to answer that question. I don't think there is a point. This is what I said back in Q1 of 2022. I said alts are too risky. Why are they too risky? Even if they bounce, they're still likely bleeding against Bitcoin, and you've seen that play out for what, 13, 14 months now, and it's likely going to play out for another 3 to 6 months. So look at this, total 3, not even bothered to break above its November high. Couldn't do it, at least not yet. I mean, maybe it will, but you can see the relative weakness in the altcoin market. Now, the altcoin optimist might say, well, that just means it's going to break out. But I would put forth the idea that liquidity for the altcoin market is drying up, and it's basically just bleeding back to Bitcoin. And the altcoin market is helping to support this rally just like it did in the past. Now, let's go take a very close look here. So Bitcoin's above 30K. The dominance, 48.64. What's the magic number? I've said 49% a lot. Really, it's 48.93 if you take the high. 48.93. If we get to 48.93, which is 0.3% away, I think as we outlined in that breaking alts video that no one got the reference to, I think the altcoin market is broken off its Bitcoin support level. You go take a look at some of these altcoins, right? Go take a look at Avalanche or ADA or Solana or Ethereum. A lot of them are just simply getting broken down on their Bitcoin pairs, right? And then they retested it and then failed the retest. Like look at AVAX Bitcoin, right? It once was holding support, then it fell below, back test, rejection down. ADA Bitcoin, the same thing. Solana Bitcoin, poor Solana Bitcoin doesn't even have really anything to back test. It's just been bleeding for basically the last 2 years or so, with very little supports held along the way. I mean, just low, up, new low, right? I mean, it just keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again. So again, you look at the altcoin market, the liquidity is going back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's above 30K. The dominance is approaching the range highs. And the danger to assume that alt season will follow would be that what happens if Bitcoin dominance breaks above this? Because if it does and it corrects, then you have this issue potentially where the altcoin liquidity is dried up and people have got their bags packed, ready to go to the moon. But the altcoin market might have other plans. So this is why we've said the altcoin market, is just too risky, in my opinion, during this phase. Bitcoin is a much safer play. So if you're, whatever exposure to crypto you have, I think, not financial advice, right? But I think it should be limited to Bitcoin, mainly because, this dominance trend, which, I've listened to people on Twitter and on YouTube basically call for the dominance to break down forever now. And I've said consistently it's not going to, and it's just going to keep breaking up to the upside, despite the disbelief that will follow with it, right? And I think a lot of people just assume we're going to stay in these ranges forever just because that's all they've ever known. But as quickly as we fell off this cliff, we can climb back up it, okay? So what's the number to watch? 49%, more specifically 48.93%. We get above that, when the correction comes for Bitcoin USD, the altcoin market should theoretically get decimated. Not only on their Bitcoin pairs, but also on their USD pairs. All right? That's what I think. We've talked about this for a long time. and we'll see if it finally plays out. The dollar is taking a bit of a hit today. It is actually up slightly the last couple of days, 102.367, but it's still relatively low. If it ends up being some type of a double bottom, or if it becomes a slightly lower low, like we saw back over here, and I mean, you can see back over here it was a double bottom, but this was the rejection here, so we probably should more so compare it to right here, or you can look at it over here. I mean, if it is a lower low or a double bottom, then and the dollar then starts to show renewed strength as we get into, say, further on in Q2 and Q3, then that's more, sort of more fuel for the dominance of Bitcoin to go higher. Because, I mean, if the economy deteriorates in the latter half of the year, which we've talked about, right? The second half of the year is when the economy could really start to deteriorate. If that happens, then I don't think altcoins will provide you any refuge. That's my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it if you want to. I know a lot of people do. But so far, I think that we can say that since the highs, right, over the last several, since we talked about how you navigate these markets, altcoins are too risky. Congratulations if you've made money on the altcoin bounces. I'm not trying to take anything away from you, but you look at total 3 and you see how much, if you look to see how much total 3, the altcoin market dropped last cycle, 92%. 92. So far, it's only dropped 74%. Now, I'm a believer in diminishing returns as diminishing losses, but the jump from 92 to 74 seems a bit too much to me. So I still think that the altcoin market has further down to go. And I think that in order to see that come to fruition, we need to see the dominance get above 49% and hold. Okay? Now, we are coming up close. Look at this move over here by the dominance, right? I mean, what do you compare it to if you don't compare it to these moves over here? If you compare it to the prior cycle, look at these moves, right? The dominance move started at the same level, right? I mean, the same level, same exact level. 39% is where it started right here. So 39% is when the rally started. This includes stables, by the way. This one started here at 39%. Now look at this. Look at overlaying Bitcoin USD onto this chart. So we'll overlay it. And we'll switch this over. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Let me switch this over to a logarithmic scale. And zoom in. Zoom into this move by the dominance. You see the dominance was going higher? Did it go higher because Bitcoin USD was pumping? Or did it go higher because Bitcoin USD was dumping? The answer is yes, okay? That's the answer. The answer is yes, it did both. The first half of the rally by Bitcoin dominance that started from 39 and went all the way to 62%, the first half of this rally was essentially when Bitcoin USD was consolidating and ultimately rallying on up. And look at where the dominance finally broke the prior range high. So in the last cycle, the prior range high was around 50, just below 51%. Look at this. Bitcoin USD pumped enough to get the dominance right above that level, right at 51%. Right? Right above 51%. Now, had you assumed back then that alt season was going to follow just because the dominance was back at the range high or slightly above it, you would have been very disappointed, right? Very disappointed. And what happened? The blue line, right? So Bitcoin USD corrected back down and the dominance continued to go higher. Why did it go higher? Because Bitcoin the dominance was able to take out this high right here, which was just below 51%. And it took, the rally by Bitcoin persisted until the dominance, the range high, was taken out. Once it was taken out, It was lights out for altcoins for the next 6 months. Lights out. They bled against Bitcoin for the next 3 months. Then they bled it against the US dollar for 3 months after that. And the rest is history. And if you say, if you don't remember, the altcoin market even bled in 2019 and 2020. If you look at some individual altcoins that still, some of them still went and put in new all-time highs later. So don't tell me they can't put in new lows. We saw plenty of altcoins put in new lows in 2019 and 2020. So that's, I think, what we're looking at right now is a very similar phase where the dominance is rallying. Liquidity from the altcoin market is going into Bitcoin because everyone's getting tired of all this, all these hacks, all these rug pulls, right? It's just not ready for the world stage. And the safe haven, right, has been back to Bitcoin. You might say, well, what about stablecoins? I mean, you tell me, right? As far as I can tell, a lot of them aren't that stable. And you essentially have a new stablecoin getting depegged, at least temporarily, every other weekend. So I don't really know that serious money, at least new serious money, is going to sort of find refuge in the stablecoin market. Furthermore, if you don't believe me, right, don't take it up with me, take it up with the data. Go look at the USDC market cap plus USDT plus BUSD market cap plus DAI. And you can see, we'll switch this over to a regular scale. Let's switch it over to, let's just look at monthly candles. If stable coins are so stable and everyone loves them, why has the market cap been bleeding since April of 2022? It's because liquidity, people are withdrawing their stable coins. I mean, they're taking it back out and they're sort of cashing that back in. So stablecoin market cap is going down. Bitcoin dominance, including stables, is going up. And I told you guys, we track the dominance excluding stables as well. But I told you many times that the dominance including stables should also go up. Why? Because the stablecoin market, should go back down. Just regulation risk, right? Regulatory risk is the issue here. So what I'm watching for is, if you're curious about when Ben will get interested in the altcoin market, I know many people have been quick to remind me all the altcoin rallies I've missed out on over the last year and a half or so. But if you're curious when I'll be interested in the altcoin market, we need to see the dominance break above 49% and hold. We then need to see the dominance continue to go up whenever the correction by Bitcoin USD occurs. And then upon that, if the dominance continues to go up, then we can talk about it, right? We can talk about it. But until then, the opportunity cost, I think, is just too high in general for the altcoin market. I'm not saying they can't rally. I mean, if Bitcoin USD continues to go up, again, it can drag the altcoin market higher with it. Like, we know that the altcoin market can go higher with Bitcoin USD, but the point is opportunity cost, right? If Bitcoin USD is going up and it's outperforming essentially every other altcoin in the top 50, what's the point of holding the other ones, right? I mean, you're taking on more risk and you're getting less reward, and the dominance of Bitcoin's going higher. Some people say the dominance is not a useful metric. I would argue that it's probably the most important metric, or one of the most important metrics for the cryptoverse, because it shows you what, if the altcoin market is capable of going into a true alt season, or if it's just one of these fake alt seasons that, gets you a short-term rally, but is ultimately very quickly sold off just because the conditions don't really allow for it in the same way that they would have in 2017 and 2021. And even go look at 2019. If you think of a more fair comparison would be to compare this to 2019, is so what? Go compare it to that, and you'll see again that the dominance continued to go higher even after Bitcoin USD corrected, right? It didn't last as long, but it still happened, and the altcoin market did not. I mean, look at this. Like, Bitcoin USD peaked here with the dominance at what, like 63%? The dominance kept going up to 73% even when Bitcoin USD started its correction. So whether you want to compare it to 2018, whether you want to compare it to 2019, that's up to you. The point is I think both 2018 and 2019 are more valid comparisons than 2021 or 2017 or 2013. That's my point, is that they're more valid comparisons. So the idea, again, is the altcoin market should continue to bleed back to Bitcoin no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. And speaking of Bitcoin USD, you can still see we are sitting just above 30K. Let me switch this over to another exchange that might be actually just a bit higher. Yeah, so on Coinbase, it's currently at about 30.26, almost 30.3. It looks like on Coinbase, it actually went up to 30,457. 2x, by the way, 2x from the bottom, what was it, about 15.4? So 30.8 would be, that would be basically a 2x move off the bottom. 30.8, 30.9, somewhere. So we're not that far off from that. So that's what I'm watching. You guys should know that. Let's see if we can get to 49%. If we can, then it's probably going to be lights out for the altcoin market. Now, one thing I will say, if you zoom in to sort of some of the corrections by Bitcoin USD that have happened when the dominance was in a sustained uptrend, the knee-jerk reaction to a drop on Bitcoin USD, the knee-jerk reaction has often been the dominance briefly goes down. So if you're watching the dominance and you see it go to 49%, and then you see it go to 50%, and then 51%, and you're thinking, all right, this is great, and then there's this huge drop, and the dominance goes back 2% or something, well, let's say it back tests 49%. That doesn't mean it's going to keep going back down. That's sort of a knee-jerk reaction we've seen, and if that happens, it shakes the confidence of the altcoin market, and then the altcoin market just continues to bleed. And then you should see the dominance continue to sort of slowly push higher from there. So, we've talked about this theory for forever, and I know the dominance has sort of been all over the place, but I will remind people once again that excluding stables, which seems reasonable to do, but excluding stables, dominance is now at 53.47%. So almost 53.5%. Furthermore, it's been putting in higher lows since May of 2021. So, don't tell me all these altcoins have been holding up against Bitcoin because the Bitcoin dominance, including stables, has basically been range bound. You look at it excluding stables, and you can see it's been putting in higher lows. And we've talked about how it's building out a massive base down here to ultimately go a lot higher. A lot of people don't want to hear it because they married their altcoin 2 years ago. But I'm telling you, the dominance of Bitcoin is a great way to navigate crypto and trying to understand what is the likely direction of the altcoin market with respect to Bitcoin. And going over to Ethereum, and I want to address this again because I've addressed it on Twitter ad nauseum for I don't know how long now. But everyone likes to say, well, Ethereum is fundamentally different than it was, a year ago, right? We have the merge, we have all this other stuff. And I would simply retort once again that the market has more or less refuted that claim. You can't say that Ethereum won't bleed against Bitcoin because of the merge, and then you just have one lower high after another ever since September. And still September was a lower high when compared to November of 2021. And let's not even talk about how that was a lower high compared to December 2017 and how that was a lower high compared to the summer of 2017. Again, yes, there's also higher lows in here as well. And I'm prepared to sort of ride that higher low narrative, but I'm not going to ride that higher low narrative when we're still chilling at 0.0637 when I think this is just a massive distribution phase up here on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. You get us back down here, then we can talk about the higher lows, right? We can talk about the higher lows. What's the point about talking about higher lows when we're still at sort of these range highs where it's been putting in these lower highs? So yes, I get the idea that people think that Ethereum is going to outperform Bitcoin, but it's not actually doing so. And I know some people will cherry pick lows and say, well, it's outperforming it from this point. I would simply say this, okay? If Ethereum has outperformed Bitcoin, how come it hasn't put in a new high since the summer of 2017? Okay? If it's constantly outperforming Bitcoin, then you have to be able to explain why it can't put in new highs against Bitcoin. Yes, if you cherry pick the 2018 bottom, or if you cherry pick the 2020 bottom, it outperformed. And also, you will know, I was a huge bull on Ethereum back then. We called it the accumulation phase of a lifetime. The first video on my channel was about Ethereum Bitcoin being undervalued, right? So, yes, I understand that Ethereum can outperform Bitcoin at certain times, right? At certain times. But I don't really think now is one of those times. I think that, if you cherry pick the lows when Ethereum's down like 95% or something, well, sure, a lot of things outperform Bitcoin if you cherry pick the lows. But here's another way to look at it, sort of a longer term view. Go look at Bitcoin compared to its 2017 high, right? Where is Bitcoin compared to its 2017 high? You cherry pick the high. Don't cherry pick the lows. Cherry pick the high as well. Let's say you FOMO'd in at the top, which most people did. Most people FOMO in at the top. They don't FOMO in at the bottom. Bitcoin from the 2017 high is up 52%. Okay, 52. Ethereum from its high in 2017, right here, 2018, is up 23%. Okay, so it's not fair to say that Ethereum constantly outperforms Bitcoin, because again, if it did, then why hasn't it put in a new high on its Bitcoin pair in 6 years? 6 years it has not put in a new high. So that is my retort to the to those people. And if the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation comes back in and comes back to some lower levels, then I'll be the first to say, hey, I think it's now going to outperform Bitcoin for a while, right? But what's the point of saying that if it's likely just going to, just continue to put in lower highs here in the short term? Which again, I think, and again, everyone on crypto Twitter is going to tell you about the flippening, right, and all this stuff, right? That's what they're gonna say. That's a cool thing to say. But again, have them address the lower highs. Have them address that, and how Ethereum is unable to really push higher on its Bitcoin pair. Hasn't done it. It just simply hasn't done it. Now, again, you should probably compare the market cap rather than the price. But even if you do that, even if you compare the market cap, right? Even if you compare the market cap, still didn't take out the highs from 2018, 2017. It doesn't have all the data going back in 2017 because you can see it's cut off right here. But it still didn't take out these highs. So I think you have to address that. And if you were to have the market cap data over here all the way to say 2015, it'd probably look something like that. So could it not just be an oscillator where when it's up here, everyone thinks that Ethereum's outperforming Bitcoin? When it's down here, everyone thinks Bitcoin's outperforming ETH. When it's up here, everyone thinks Ethereum's outperforming Bitcoin. I mean, it just sort of ebbs and flows, right? The Cryptoverse is very cyclical, right? Very, very cyclical. And we've seen this happen many, many times where, everyone wants to jump on the train because they've only ever seen something outperform. But then when you take a more sobering glance at the returns of Ethereum compared to Bitcoin, it's not, you can't easily find timeframes where Bitcoin has outperformed Ethereum, and mainly Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin if you more so cherry pick local lows after bear markets. And why shouldn't you? I mean, if you can get in at those phases, and that can be quite useful. I also wanted to address one more thing. I do feel compelled to defend Bitcoin here, and I make no apologies for it. Everyone's been talking about the dominance going lower for a long time, and I've been adamant that it's going to go higher. But one of the most common retorts to sort of Bitcoin and Ethereum is that, well, Ethereum didn't put in a new low in November, right? That's a common retort. Well, I'd say, well, not yet. But I would say another retort is Bitcoin, even with its new low, was still only 77% down, right? Even with the new low, 77% down, which we called for this low, right? I mean, tons of people were calling for, June to be the bottom, right? We said, no, it'll probably crash in November or December, and it did. But one thing to consider here is that this is a new low for Bitcoin that was 77% down from the all-time high. So you might say, well, Bitcoin put in a new low, but Ethereum didn't. And then you go take a look at Ethereum and you're like, yeah, it did not put in a new low, but this higher low was 78% down. This low over here was 82% down. Okay, so yes, it didn't put in a new low, at least not yet. But guess what, right? Bitcoin still did not drop as much as Ethereum did, right? Let's look at one other thing. We talked about this not too long ago, but I want to talk about it again. And that is the year-to-date performance. Look at the recovery years for Bitcoin. Let's just look at 2019, right? Look at 2019. Massive rally, faded in the second half of the year. What did we say? 2015, 2019 recovery years, wrecked the bulls for half the year, wrecked the bears for half the year. It could be 6 months and 6 months. It could be 3, 3, 3, 3, whatever, right? It's just the point is both sides need to get wrecked this year. 2019, you wrecked the Bears first, then you wrecked the Bulls. But look, I mean, Bitcoin finished this year up strong. 2020, we saw a massive capitulation where we went back down to the range lows in a recession, which again is a risk this time as well. We've talked about that. But look at this. In 2019, Bitcoin finished the year up well off its low. Well off its yearly open. Despite the fact that Bitcoin finished its year off well above the yearly open, Ethereum did not in 2019. It did not. It was below its yearly open by the end of the year. The weakness that comes from the altcoin market during the sort of the recovery year by Bitcoin is very obvious when Bitcoin comes back in. When it comes back down, the altcoin market just profusely bleeds back to Bitcoin as people really start to wonder, what if my altcoin doesn't survive, until what if it doesn't go put a new all-time highs? What if there's a new shiny object next cycle that people care about? What if this is just a relic altcoin that no one's going to care about in 2 years, like BBQ coin of 2013 or MadeSafe coin of 2013 or World coin from 2013? They're everywhere. Okay, and look at 2017. There's so many coins that put in new highs. No one cares about them anymore, and most people don't even know what their names are anymore. So this is the point, right? Is that, by the way, if you compare this 2019 ETH to 2023 ETH, you can see right here it's what 1.6 or so. Actually, another way to look at this is to look at it as measured from the peak, take it out to the next peak, sort of zoom into this range, if you zoom in for this range for Bitcoin, you'll kind of see where we are, right? See where we are. Look at it for ETH. So we're getting close to that point in terms of a cyclical time frame for Ethereum. It happened at 529. So we rallied here from December until June, but it was, this point was 337 days after this started, and then the second half of the year was brutal. We came back down below the yearly open, and then we finally rallied into a bull market, right? But the recovery year was brutal because first we wrecked the Bears, and then we wrecked the Bulls, right? So that's what we normally do in recovery years. So, ADA is another example, right? Look at ADA here. Just look at it to the bottom. Look how long it took ADA to finally hit its low. Over 800 days. It's currently at just below 600 days. So you're still talking about potentially, 6 months, and the bear market for ADA still isn't necessarily longer than it was last time. Just something to consider, of course. But let's go see where Bitcoin is. We're still at 30K. By the way, we have a lot of important events this week. We have CPI on Wednesday, most important CPI report ever until the next one. We have the Fed minutes, I believe, is coming out on Wednesday from the last FOMC, which might actually be more interesting to see what they had to say. And then we also have the Shanghai hard fork for Ethereum. So Wednesday should be a fairly eventful day in the Cryptoverse and risk assets in general. I imagine whatever happens, it will take a few days to digest everything, but Wednesday should be somewhat interesting to see kind of where things are going. Some interesting things about some of the precious metal stuff, by the way, and this sort of goes back to 2019. By the way, the yield curve inverted in 2019 too, right? So if you want to say this time's different, it's not really. I mean, we also had a yield curve inversion in 2019, but when crypto sort of rolled over in 2019, gold and silver corrected back with it initially, and then they continued their rally even after Bitcoin and the Cryptoverse came back down, and then the crypto then took off the following year. Why did crypto take off the following year, right? We went back to quantitative easing, right? QE. It's like it's like a drug for speculators, right? That sweet money, that sweet QE. So I think we need to go back to QE in order to see Bitcoin and the Cryptoverse as a whole really make a move to sort of those range highs from the last bull market. Another metric to look at is the dominance of Bitcoin and Ethereum And one of the interesting things here is I would argue it's leading the Bitcoin dominance itself. Look at this. It's already broken out. It's already broken out. So it's already taken out its high in June of 2022, and its high in October 2021, and the high in August 2021. It's as high as this has been since basically April of 2021. Think about that. April of 21, exactly 2 years ago when this move broke down. Where did it break down from? 86% dominance for blue chip dominance, Bitcoin and ETH dominance. 86%. It's now at 67.93%, so basically 68%. This wasn't the first time it went to that level. It also went to that level back in 2017 as well. Let's look at this on a weekly time frame. Right? The Cryptoverse is very cyclical. And when you're down here, no one ever believes you're going to come back up here. And when you're up here, no one thinks you're going to come back down. And you can see the breakout has occurred. So it's likely just going to sort of zigzag its way on up. And then guess what? After all that happens, when it's up here, the good news is we can finally talk about alt season. Once you see this really reclaim where it should be. And I think if you think about it, it's all very cyclical, right? Like the Cryptoverse is healing, right? Like nature is healing. It makes more sense for the more useless projects bleed back to Bitcoin. And not all of them do, but most of them do. Bitcoin absorbs that liquidity, rallies. Eventually, the purchasing power of the altcoins with respect to Bitcoin is so low that it can no longer sustain the Bitcoin USD price. Then Bitcoin dumps. The altcoin market, again, has nowhere to hide. But if you think about it, like it's all about sort of the ebb and flow of the business cycle. I mean, if we're in QT, we're in higher interest rates, and we're seeing more a flight to the blue chips. But guess what? What do you think is going to happen when we're back up here with the blue chip dominance? What do you think is going to happen? Well, by that point, risk assets are likely going to be begging for the Fed to go back to QE, and at some point they will. They always do. And then you'll see a more sustained move back to the downside in the blue chip dominance as people then start to speculate a little bit more seriously on the altcoin market. This is my best guess, right? And I don't want to give you the impression. I mean, I know I don't get everything right. There's plenty of things that I say that do not come true. So I don't want people to think that I have the impression that I think that. I know it's not true. But I do think that in general, the calls for the dominance to go higher on a Bitcoin-only rally has happened. Now we just need to see if the reverse plays out. So when Bitcoin USD corrects, does the dominance keep going higher? And if it does, then I think the thesis has finally been validated. If it doesn't, then I guess I'm just a relic from a prior cycle myself, huh? So, anyways, we will. I don't even know if I want to look at the chat, to be completely honest, but we have about 3,000 to 4,000 people watching. If you guys like the content, again, make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. We are still running the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. So make sure you check that out if you want to join. But as I've said before, you don't. It's more so. A lot of people are probably just, better off DCAing whatever they want over the next year or something. No, I'm not really. I'm not a believer in super cycles. The lengthening cycle stuff I said was wrong long ago, right? I mean, we in February of 2022, I said we're in a bear market, right? So that did not play out. And I mean, it's important to talk about the things that don't play out and the things that do, and that was one that didn't. But once I recognized it, I think it was January, February, I said, all right, guys, the altcoin market's now just going to bleed for a while back to Bitcoin, and I think that's been the case. Last cycle was tricky because the first peak seemed obvious to sell into. That's where I sold most of my Bitcoin last cycle, was into the first peak. Reaccumulated some in the summer of 2021 and expected it to go higher in late 2021, and it didn't go as high as I thought. So then I ended up not recognizing it until Q1 of 2022. But I mean, that's the game we play, right? Some are going to go better than others. But anyways, if there are any questions, maybe I will try to answer a few. It looks like some people are asking about altcoins. I don't really think I really still don't think altcoins are that attractive from a risk adjusted returns perspective. I mean, there's a difference in my mind, not in a lot of people's minds, I think, but in my mind, there's a difference between like your return and your risk adjusted return. Like I'm not saying you can't go out and make money on altcoins, right? I mean, there's still money sort of sloshing around. But again, the altcoin market as a whole hasn't gone anywhere for months, right? I mean, the altcoin market total 3 has basically been flat since January, right? Total 3 market cap. So the moves that you're seeing in the altcoin market are not a reflection of new money coming into the space. It's more so a reflection of people just moving from one altcoin to another and trying to extract as much liquidity and as much value as they can. That's the reality. I'm not saying you can't make money doing it, but it is a zero-sum game. So if you're making money, someone else is losing money. If you're losing money, that means someone else is making money. So do be aware of that. Yeah, someone asked if I can look at Bitcoin by M2, and I actually looked at this earlier. So this is a little bit of an interesting chart to look at, to say the least. So we'll first cover Bitcoin USD without M2. One of the things that you'll remember, we actually have a video on the channel like right here where I said Bitcoin has already retested its 2017 high. And this was back in July of 2021. Because if you think back then, a lot of people were calling for 20K, right? They said 20K is coming. And we put out a video in July of 2021, saying, look, yes, it's possible we retest 20K, but what happens, right? What happens if we divide by the money supply? Now, before we get into this, why divide by the money supply? Well, the reason why you divide by the money supply is look at the S&P 500 divided by the money supply. Look at the S&P 500 divided by the money supply. Hasn't gone anywhere in decades, right? Since 97. Like the current valuation of the S&P divided by the money supply is the same as it was in 1996, 1997. Same thing. If the money supply goes up, there's more dollars in existence. More people will buy assets with them, right? You go take a look at M2, by the way. It's been going down recently, right? So that's a headwind for risk in general. But at some point, it'll start to go back up. So then what happens if you take Bitcoin and divide it by M2? So I think it's a worthwhile way to look at it. And so we did this. We did this back in July of 2021 and said, look, if you take Bitcoin and you divide it by M2, we're already testing the prior all-time high from 2017, right? Now you forget having to go back down to 20K. We're already testing it. So you don't, I mean, it's important to account for the dollars, that have all the new money that's been printed. So here we were retesting the all-time high. It doesn't look like it. You divide by M2, perfect retest at the all-time high. Now we're testing it from below. I'm not saying it can't break above. It could, right? Hasn't broken above yet. So that is an important level. So, I mean, in the same way that we came back down to the 2017 high and held it as support when accounting for M2, we're now trying to break through it, but from the other direction. And you can see over here, it actually took 2 attempts to sort of break through this. Now we're currently on our first attempt to break through. So if it comes back down, then I suppose we'll just try again later. And then we'll break through if we don't now. So that was a good question. I think accounting for M2 is a thing that we should all be doing because the reality is, and it's a sobering reality, and I know it's kind of obnoxious for me to say this kind of stuff, but again, like sometimes it's an illusion that you're making money is the reality, right? One reason we invest is just to keep up with inflation, because if you just let everything sit in fiat forever, it's going to be debased essentially to zero. So by investing, you have the ability to at least outperform inflation, is the idea. But it is a sobering reality at times when you think about how sometimes the valuation of your portfolio is up not because the underlying asset is up or whatever, or it's fundamentally worth more. It's just there's more dollars in existence, and so those dollars have to go somewhere. This is the S&P divided by M2, and look at the S&P not divided by M2, right? I mean, it's basically just up and to the right, So the money supply does make a big deal when thinking about risk assets in general. It's a very important thing, I think, to look at, because it sort of reflects the idea that all these dollars in existence are just inflating the supply, or inflating the market caps, everything. Think about it like this, right? Like, let's say your portfolio goes up 2x over a certain period of time. Let's say it goes up 2x over. I mean, obviously, inflation's not this high, but let's just say your portfolio goes up 2x over a year. That's great, but what happens if everything you depend on went up 2x in a year? Like, what happens if housing prices went up 2x in a year? What happens if your grocery bill went up 2x in a year? What happens if it costs you twice as much to fill up your car with gas? So it's like, all right, well, your portfolio went up 2x, but so did everything else. So, it's like, congratulations on your portfolio going higher, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to feel any wealthier. So that's why it's important to sort of consider these things and where you're putting your money. Sometimes assets can go up against the US dollar, but so what? A lot of them are just bleeding back to Bitcoin over the macro scale. I would argue that if you're not valuing your crypto portfolio in Satoshis, you're doing it completely wrong. Okay, the USD valuation is completely irrelevant, because if you're holding an altcoin and it goes up 10%, and then Bitcoin went up 50%, who cares, right? You're not a genius for picking an altcoin that went up 10%. It's silly that you held on to so much risk while you could have just held the less risky thing, and it went up much more. A lot of altcoins, the reality is they bleed against Bitcoin over the macro scale. They can outperform for a cycle or two. Some of them can hold their own for even longer. But a lot of these, I mean, and I'm going to pick on Litecoin just because I can also throw in the caveat that during its halving year, it can typically outperform, up until about June. I've said that many times, but, when you look at Litecoin, Bitcoin, and you go back and look at it over the years, it's just bleeding against Bitcoin, right? I mean, this is just a downtrend, okay? So it's like, yeah, can Litecoin go up in a bull market? Yeah. But for every dollar you put in Litecoin, it's a dollar you didn't put into Bitcoin. It's a dollar you didn't put into Ethereum. And the blue chips typically outperform, right? They typically outperform. Ethereum put in new highs. Bitcoin put in new highs. What did Litecoin do? What did it do last cycle? It went up to the prior high. No new highs. And I've said before, I mean, Litecoin can show relative strength. I mean, I'll give it its sort of time in the sun here, just because I know there's got to be someone in the comments that likes Litecoin. So I will say, we have typically seen it show relative strength like it is showing right now, going into sort of the halving. So we are still seeing something like that play out. It doesn't mean that it can't come back in and then go back up, but during the halving years, it can show relative strength with respect to the altcoin market for like the first 5 or 6 months. So we're already in month 4. So I will give it that, which is why I also picked on it, because I knew I could point that out. All right, any other questions? Show BBQ coin. It's from an era long ago. No, I mean, I actually used to hold Litecoin back in the day, but I don't hold it anymore. When I say back in the day, I mean like 6 years ago. Yeah, I ask questions and everyone wants to know about altcoins. I've already told you guys. I've already told you my opinion on altcoins. Well, maybe we should wrap it up. Yeah, I mean, as far as Bitcoin, I've just said, right? DCA according to risk levels. That's what I've historically done. The only crypto I've even picked up in like 15 months is Bitcoin. I haven't picked up any other cryptocurrencies. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Where you guys are just asking about altcoins, and that's not really my interest right now. So go to another channel and ask them about altcoins. I'm sure they'll tell you the next 100x altcoin gems. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and I will.